Right now on Tech Radio, the Irish fridge on the moon.
Hi, I'm Artemis. I am a computer-generated AI voice, and you're listening to Tech Radio.
Every week online and on air with RT Radio, we bring you the latest in tech from Ireland and across the world. You're welcome to episode 1056, looking at the 7 biggest stories of the week. A load of Irish stories this week, including, of course, the Irish Moon Mission, which is up and coming. In Paris, we had the AI Action Summit, and our guest, Cormac Lynch from Camara, will share more about the Social Enterprises Mission to increase computer literacy across Africa.
From techcentral.ie, this is Tech Radio with Dusty Rhodes and Niall Kitson.
I'm Dusty, joining me as always, our editor-in-chief, Niall Kitson. Ireland on the moon. You know I love stories like this every time it comes up.
Well, when we had a look at the notes for today's episode, I was like, moon space story right at the top. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, there he goes. Right. Yeah, Dusty's in there first. Innovus Labs, who are down in Grangegorman in Dublin, have developed a cooling system to be used on the moon, okay? I think this is fascinating because it draws inspiration from heat regulation mechanisms in an elephant's ears.
Okay.
I said that correctly, okay? You think about an elephant and how big their ears are. How they actually cool down is that a lot of the warm blood that's in the elephant's body will go to the ears. And because the ears are kind of so big and so thin, what happens is the blood goes through them and kind of automatically cools down. So they've done something like that. Now, obviously, it's not the same thing, but they have been inspired by that. And the result is that this Irish company has created a unit which is lighter than traditional cooling systems. The space guys like it, and they're going to use it in a deployment to the moon later this year. So bravo.
Okay. Wait, which space guys?
Innovus Labs in Grangegorman developed the thing. They haven't actually said which mission. And I was kind of going, I wonder how many missions are going to the moon this year. There's like a dozen. There's like a dozen planned missions to the moon this year. It's ridiculous. All kinds of people from all over the world.
Everybody wants some of that moon rock.
Well, you know what? It's like science fiction movies of the 50s where everybody wants a land grab on the moon. Maybe it's starting to actually happen now. You know?
Yeah.
However, other big Irish news this week is our friends at the Young Scientists exhibition, which of course we love because we're always bowled over by the teenagers and the ideas they have. And not only ideas, but they actually go, and here's a working prototype. It's like, what? You're 15.
Yeah, very smart kids. And the standard just seems to be getting better and better every year. On a bit of sad news this week, BT, who have been the sponsor since 2000, they've been sponsoring it for 25 years. And what happened in the last few weeks, and this is subject to regulatory approval, but BT Ireland sold their wholesale and their enterprise business units to Speed Fibre Group, who you would know as the parent company for Magnet Plus. Right, and they have another operator they look after here as well. I think it's HEA Net. Let me just check that. Magnet Plus and eNet. That's the parent company. So they're taking over that business. And unfortunately, there's going to be quite a lot of redundancies in Vodafone because that's a big chunk of their Irish business going. So I think there's in the region of 300 people being let go, assuming this deal, of course, is completed. Always not, not over till it's over. But so as part of this wind down, BT has just said, look, we've had a good run, but our business has realigned in Ireland. We're not really a good fit for the Young Scientists anymore. We couldn't do it the way we want to, even if we wanted to now. So can you remember who the Young Scientists and Technology exhibition sponsor was before BT?
Now I never remember things, but I'm going to say Aer Lingus.
It was Aer Lingus for 33 years. Actually, 37 years, I think, was the first one.
Was it really?
First one in 63 or 67. Anyway, over 30 years.
So the Young Scientists exhibition has been going since the 60s. And in that time, they've had two sponsors.
Yeah.
Wow.
Aer Lingus and BT. So it just shows the kind of cachet that the exhibition has around it. It really is a cornerstone of the tech calendar, but also so vital in generating that talent pipeline that we talk about all the time on the show, how to get people into STEM and keep them there.
If I'm not mistaken, the Collison brothers who went on to set up Stripe were young scientists.
Really?
I think they were.
Huh.
I think they were. And now I don't think if they won it, but they certainly did well on it, and it certainly gave them enough of a push to keep going. And look at what they did. And how many of those people who've been through the Young Scientist exhibition have gone on to do amazing things? I mean, it's countless. It's fantastic. We love it. We love it. And if you want to take a listen to some of the Young Scientists over the years, we usually do the show as the second week in January.
Yeah, first week in January every year without fail.
So if you're looking back over the podcast feed, you'll be able to listen to a few of those with Niall on the floor at the RDS. I wonder who'd be the next sponsor for the Young Scientists exhibition. Maybe it'll be Musk Industries.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Speaking continuing, I should say, with Irish news this week, really kind of interesting studies out about Irish people, young Irish people, and social media.
Well, Safer Internet Day was this week. It was Wednesday. And this is sort of an annual awareness event where sort of educators, young people, parents basically get an update on the kind of threats facing young people online. And this year it was kind of, I don't want to say kicked off, but the organisers drew attention to an EU-wide report which found that a third of people aged 16 to 30, which is actually quite a wide cohort when you think about it.
Yeah, it's not kids. It's not kids. Yeah,
it's not kids. I mean, it's starting at those still formative years and going up to, kind of the low side of middle age, the higher side of
the
being
low
an emerging
side of
adult.
middle age at 30. You're a disgrace. Continue.
So apparently some of the stats, and these are EU wide again, so this isn't just particularly Ireland, which sort of makes things a little bit hairier when you think about it. So people are in general spending 2 hours a day on their social feeds, and yet is it helping? No. Apparently people are feeling more lonely and isolated than ever. And this is something that is being borne out both in the networks themselves, like Instagram and TikTok, who are designed to be addictive and designed to have people just, consuming content all day long, candy floss stuff, really, that it doesn't have any sort of long-term benefit to your life or doesn't teach you anything, anything like that, just anything to keep you engaged on the platform, at the expense of developing, real emotional connections with people. We've talked on the show, I think a couple of weeks ago, about the male loneliness epidemic, and I think it's probably a little bit reductive to say that it just applies to young men, because it's kind of just to put this in a bubble, just to explain what it is very briefly, that young men are going through a period where they're having less friends, they're not engaging in relationships, they're not dating, they're not marrying at the levels they're used to, they're not having kids, and basically they're withdrawing from society, as yourself and myself would have known it growing up, because there are other sort of low risk alternatives out there online. But of course, there's no human element to it. And once you get inside those bubbles, you end up in these sort of echo chambers online, where again you're talking to people that you have no you can't put a face to the name. You're just, perhaps interacting with a name on a screen who may or may not be human. And you've just got, people feeling incredibly down about themselves. And I'm sure that's splitting across both genders at the moment. When I was looking into it first, it was affecting boys and young men. I would not be surprised if it affected girls in the same way. So this is one of the things that Safer Internet Day this year has been looking at, just that issue of loneliness. Of course, Safer Internet Day, a wonderful event organised every year, coordinated this year by the Irish Safer Internet Centre, which is a collaboration between Hotline, the ISPCC, National Parents Council, and WebWise, an organisation that you might have heard about on the show quite a while as well. But of course, there is, a spark of good news in there somewhere. I mean, the fact that we know this is an issue is illuminating and important in itself.
I think we've known this has been an issue for a long time because, as you said, we had the male loneliness epidemic, and that's years ago, all right? And it's going across the board now, and it's particularly prevalent in human beings of all ages and younger people as well, which is the scary thing. You kind of just look like my counsellor all of a sudden. Because, no, seriously. Like, I'm kind of falling into that myself, all right? And the weird thing about it is I know that this is happening, okay? Because it's just, if I have like 5 minutes, I'll go, just watch something on YouTube. I'll just watch shorts because I don't want to like get stuck into anything, all right? I will literally come out an hour and a half later of just looking at pure crap.
Yeah.
All right. That has absolutely no connection or interest. For some reason this week, I'm getting all of the reasons why South Korea is a great country. Why? Did I mention it in a conversation? I have no idea. It's kind of interesting. Well, whatever. But I'm just going through that. And then I kind of put the phone away and I say to myself, I could have read a book.
Yeah.
Or I'm always saying that, I should get out and just go for a walk more for the joy of it. I don't know what joy there is in just walking, but anyways. Meet somebody for a coffee. These are things that I could have done, but it's kind of, you just kind of get into that little bubble where you're lazy and you go, just whatever, flick through. So I can see that happening to me, and I can see the reasons why it is making my life probably of a lower quality than what it could be if I didn't have a mobile phone. So anyway, that's my little thing over with. I think what's interesting about this whole thing is that we're recognizing it and people want to do something about it, but we're in a tricky situation now because of all of the changes in the United States and the fact that all of the big social media companies are based there, and the prevailing attitude seems to be very much laissez-faire. Just, just let it be whatever it's going to be.
Yeah.
And they don't care. Whereas in the EU, it's the opposite, where they're kind of saying, well, do you know what? It's not good. We should do something about it, which seems like the sensible and adult kind of thing to do. But for Ireland, the problem is that all of these big American companies are regulated in the EU by Ireland. It's Commission the Man and the Data Protection Commissioner who are based here because Facebook and Apple and Meta and Twitter and whatever, they all have bases here. So it's kind of a big problem for a little country, I think. How it
sure is.
Anyways, that was interesting. That was Safer Internet Week. Anyways, the other big news story of the week this week was in Paris, the AI Action Summit.
Yeah.
Now, this is quite deep on the AI side of things. What do you know about it?
Well, it is. I mean, the Action Summit is basically, it's an international conference where all the, one would hope the heads of government of, every country in the world gets together with industry and academia and just sort of says, okay, we have this technology. We have this, I don't even want to call it a generational technology because that implies that it's stuck within one generation. It's most certainly not. It's technology that's going to change all our lives and society. What are we going to do about it? What's important? How do we approach the development of AI in a way that, exploits the business benefits, exploits the societal benefits, and works for us, people, instead of being used for potentially nefarious purposes like cybercrime or deepfakes or what have you. So it's basically, we have this technology. How do we manage it? What do we do about it? And what was interesting is at the end of the conference, there was a statement issued, and the idea is that, everything culminates in a statement. Everybody signs off on it and says, yes, this is the plan. It doesn't really matter if it actually gets, carried out or whatever. But
it's an aspiration that everybody agrees on.
Yeah, it's an aspiration. This is where we want to go. And as it happened, a couple of quirky things happened. One of which was that US Vice President J.D. Vance gave a speech, and that man has incredible mascara. Whoever he paid to do his makeup that day, they did a job.
Okay. Aside from his makeup, then, what were the words?
So he stayed on message for the Trump administration. He talked about how AI was super important, that it's important it be used, to make us all prosperous, that, we find ways that we can generate, that we can progress the technology while, respecting our right to free speech. Right?
Okay.
So ultimately, he managed to drop in the greatest hits there of, we will do what we want for money. We will do what we want because that's our values. We can say whatever we want and you can't come back to us. And at the end, it culminated in this statement, and both the US and the UK refused to sign it because of this little bit of wording in there. So the final statement said that AI should be inclusive and sustainable. Okay? Inclusive, sustainable. Both words that are anathema to the Trump administration. They have been putting the screws to DEI since the election campaign began. This has been one of their big enemies.
They don't do inclusive, and they don't do sustainable.
They want Christian nationalism. They're not making any bones about it. And sustainable, I mean, Trump's energy policy is drill baby drill. They don't care about sustainable energy. They care about natural resources. They want you to go back to coal and gas and this sort of thing. Never mind the fact that the energy companies are like, yeah, we know this is, finite. We're investing in sustainables.
Yeah.
And we knew we had to for years. So this is what we're doing. And you can say it. It's nice bit of rhetoric if it gets your base riled up. But look, we can do that bit, but we're also doing this bit over here. So don't harsh our buzz by saying all we're interested in is fossil fuels, because that's not true. However, at a time when things might seem like there's a lot of discord out there, it also creates an opportunity for some people to stand up and go, well, do you know what? If these guys over here are going to be jerks, we're actually over here and we're pretty cool. And we know that one of the problems AI is facing is infrastructure. I mean, the amount of energy AI is going to consume is fiercely challenging. I mean, we can't manage it over here. Our national grid isn't up to it. I mean, there needs to be serious investment and a whole rake of solutions introduced before we can actually have more data centers, let alone have them running ChatGPT queries all the time.
Yeah.
But Emmanuel Macron basically stood up and went, we're nuclear. We got lots of energy. You want to set up you want to do AI here?
Yeah.
We got it. We got you, bro.
France is big on nuclear power, and they've got more nuclear power than they need.
Yeah. So
Macron said, okay, Grant, well, it's so funny, these people. I'm going to donate 1 gigawatt of nuclear power to data centers that he wants set up across France. So he's looking for like the 35 or 40 data centers to be set up across the country. And he's working with the people from the UAE on this particular project. I think in some ways, Macron is right, because he says the EU does need to speed up. Everything that's happening in AI at the moment has been happening in the States. And then they got a big kick in the ass from DeepSeek, which is based in China. Where is Europe in this? Nowhere.
Here is the fun. Here is the fun, right? America saying, hey, we're the innovators over here, but through years of underfunding and lack of investment. Their infrastructure, their energy infrastructure is really bad. I mean, particularly in Texas, where Oracle is spending big bucks on building a data center. Like, just letting private interests manage their energy infrastructure has been a disaster for all the states, right? So that's why, OpenAI and Oracle and SoftBank came up and said, we're doing this Stargate thing, $500 billion to invest in AI infrastructure. We're going to have all the power that you want. Whereas Europe are like, you want to do this now? Come over. We're good. You don't have to wait on us. We're ready. By the way, you're playing by the rules. So what do you want to do? Do you want to wait to innovate, or do you want to do it now and do it properly?
There's definitely two very serious differences between the two sides. I also think is what's interesting happening, on the political side of things is quite interesting, where with Ukraine, and all of a sudden now there's peace talks about Ukraine between Russia and America. And Ukraine are going, hello?
Yeah.
And the EU are kind of going, well, hang on, we want to be involved as well. Anyway, that's politics and news, and I don't want to get into that. But anyway, the AI Action Summit in Paris was interesting. And as you say, the differences that it showed up between the various continents. Also making news this week, it's a time for Musk Corner. Oh my God, we'll have to fly through this because there's always too much. He's been trolling Sam Altman this week. What a brilliant headline this was.
Yeah, well, this is sort of related because this happened while Sam Altman was at the AI Action Summit. Musk made a bid for OpenAI for $97.4 billion. He said, I'll buy it. I'll take it off your hands. You're meant to be a non-profit. What are you doing trying to turn it into a for-profit entity? I'll take everything. I'll take the whole lot. However, and here's the thing, Altman isn't in the mood to sell. He's not interested in that. So he made a counteroffer of sorts. He said, no, we're not for sale, but I'll buy Twitter for $9.74 billion. Exactly 10% of what OpenAI is worth. I thought that was some class trolling. Backed up by an interview for Bloomberg where Altman said, he kind of clapped back at this game of,
I know. I love this quote.
As we call it in rugby, shithousery. Altman sort of came back and he said, I feel for the guy. Probably his whole life is from a position of insecurity. I don't think he's like a happy person. I mean, could you imagine how much that wound up?
Do you know, but now that you said that, I think I've seen a photograph of him being wound up by that, or maybe just looks like that all the time. Did you see the photographs of Musk in the Oval Office during the week?
Oh my goodness.
It looked like Donald Trump had a bring the kids to work day, and it was the kid.
Yeah. Well, do you know what's so fascinating about that press conference? Well, a couple of things. One, Musk coming out and basically saying, yeah, I probably do spread a bit of misinformation. I'm happy to be corrected on it. Check his timeline. I'll find, I think you'll find he doesn't do corrections.
No.
But the body language involved in that scene, right?
Yes.
Because Musk was standing, dominant position, media sort of kneeling and whatever to get the microphones and get everybody in, because this wasn't this was a press conference within the Oval Office, so not designed to be housing lots of people in seats asking upwards to the lectern questions. This is just an office, so everybody has to cram in and sit and find their spot. Musk is there with his young lad X, who was there playing around, doing his thing. By the way, that's a visual cue. I think we're going to see an awful lot of Bring Your Kid to Work Day during the Trump administration. Again, speaking to that Christian nationalism, let's get back to the family kind of thing.
Well, half of Trump's kids are involved in the administration anyway.
Not anymore. Not anymore. They've had enough. They will amplify what he says on X.
I think there's some of them still in there.
But anyway, so Musk's body language, he dominated that room.
Yeah.
He owned the room. Everybody was looking at him and his kid, who was doing kid things, which was very, very adorable. And then off to the right was Trump sitting there chiming in occasionally, but really not liking this, small human going about the place spreading germs everywhere, because we know Trump is a germaphobe. So it's just the body language of that event and the fact that everything was on Elon in the room, and then occasionally Trump would say something. So there's a chink in the relationship right there. I mean, if this Doge thing doesn't work out the way Trump expects it to, we're going to see Mr. Musk being jettisoned fairly quickly.
Or maybe it's working out exactly the way that he wants it to, because Doge seems to be dismantling a lot of agencies that are investigating Musk. But anyway, we'll leave it there.
Well, we'll get into that another time.
That's for another day. Listen, we're running out of time before we get into our interview. I had some other quick bits of news and just something interesting I found out during the week. Number one is go to your Google map or your Apple map and go to the Gulf of Mexico and see what it says. They're saying that the change is due to the fact that the name has been changed officially in the United States, so they're taking account of that because that's law.
One coda I would say to that as an exercise: if you have a VPN, and you can choose what country you're in,
go into the States,
Go into the States, see what it says. Go into Ireland, see what it says. Go into different places and see what it says, and see if it's carried over, because I bet you it has not.
Well, we'll check that out. A couple of Irish bits of news. WorkHuman are setting up a new innovation centre in the old Central Bank on Dame Street, which is now the WeWork. So good luck to them on that. Squarespace, who do a lot of kind of websites and marketing and scheduling and stuff like that, are adding 120 jobs here in Ireland, which will bring it up to 400 people that they employ in the country. It's fantastic. If you're into engineering or product roles, get onto Squarespace, because they are hiring. And the final thing I was going to say was, I was just lazy and I didn't have access to Microsoft Word, but I needed to know how many words were in a particular article. I went, that's what AI is for. That's why we need 1 gigawatts of power coming from France from nuclear generators, so I can count how many words are in an article, all right? Threw it into Claude. Claude gave me a fairly quickish answer, like within 10, 15 seconds, but it went, this is estimated. And it told me it was like 1,500 words estimated, all right? I put it into Gemini. Gemini said it was around 1,600 words. I threw it into Copilot. Copilot just said, error. I tried it 3 times. It was just error, so it did nothing, all right? I put it into Perplexity. Perplexity said it had 700 words. Which is half of what the other said, all right? So then I put it into DeepSeek. This is quite interesting, because DeepSeek would show you how it's thinking. This is really annoying, right? Because DeepSeek went, okay, so I need to define what a word is. So let me just go through each word then and count it. And it literally went through each word and was counting it up. 16, 17, 18. And it took ages to do. But the answer was 2,071 words. And it took its time. It took at least 10 minutes to count all the words.
But it showed its work.
All right. And then I went to eventually, I kind of thought, that's weird. You're going from 700 in Perplexity to 1,500 in Claude and Gemini to 2,070 in DeepSeek, all completely different answers. And then I threw it into Microsoft Word instantly, 2,071. The exact same answer as DeepSeek gave me.
Quicker.
So I think it's kind of, those one of the things where you go with ChatGPT, if you ask it how many R's are in the word strawberry, and it'll tell you it's 2, when it's actually 3. I think I may have discovered one of those things. So there's another thing. There's 2 things to try. Wow. Is go into Google Maps and have a look at the Gulf of Mexico. America. And also throw some word count tests into your favorite AI and then compare it to Microsoft Word. Right. Phew. Let's get into our interview this week. Niall, thanks as always for keeping us up to date.
Share the knowledge and invite a friend to listen. Search Apple, Spotify, or YouTube for Tech Radio Ireland.
When we're finished with old gear, we're quite used to swapping it for a new device under the WE Directive, or getting cash or credit on the secondary market. Another route for keeping old devices in use is to donate them to charity. One Irish social enterprise in particular has seen great success cleaning up PCs for reuse in schools across Africa. To find out more, Niall Kitson spoke with Camara founder Cormac Lynch about 20 years of social entrepreneurship and the circular economy as a force for good.
Cormac, people might be familiar with Camara and the work that you've been doing. I mean, you've been around for 20 years now, and you've been kind of on the cusp of what we know now to be social entrepreneurialism, what we know now to be called the circular economy. So let's dive into the genesis of the Camara project, if you will, because you were very much disruptors, I suppose, is the word, when it comes to how people dealt with old, aged hardware.
Right. Thanks, Niall. It was almost 20 years ago to the day that I went out to Ethiopia. I was very much interested in seeing what I could do to improve education out there. I had been lucky enough, I just come from a career in investment banking, and I was lucky enough to have a couple of years where I could do something I was really passionate about. So when I went out to Ethiopia and I visited some schools and some colleges out there, and I asked them what I could do to help them. And when they heard that I was from Ireland, they said, "Oh God, you guys have loads of computers there. Can you get us some computers? That's really what we want." So when I came back from Ethiopia, I kind of forgot about it for a couple of months, but then I said, well, I better get them those computers. So, and even though I didn't really have a technology background, actually the first person I asked Eamon Dunphy, he had a radio show back then, whether he would get us make an announcement for us, and he did. And people started offering me computers back then. And so I got a small workshop in Dublin city centre and got some volunteers, some people who knew more about computers than I did, and we started collecting them. And back then it was very much like Pentium 2 would have been state of the art back then, and we started collecting them. And by roughly November 2005 or 2005, we had about 100 computers refurbished, loaded with we had put a Linux-based operating system on them. They were all big CRT monitors, but anyway, we had about 100 computers. We packed them into a 20-foot container and sent them off to some colleges in Ethiopia, and that was great. And I thought, that was job done. But then I kind of about 6 months later, I said, well, I better go out and see how those computers are doing. So I went out to Ethiopia, and one of the places we sent computers was a private teacher training college. And they were using those computers around the clock. They had so many people, they were just really making great use of them. And that was great. And then we went to a government sponsored teacher training college as well. And the computers were still lying in boxes when we went out. And that was obviously somewhat eye-opening and disappointing to me. So it became very clear to me early on that you kind of have to be, again, the computers out there is in many ways the easy part. You have to, you really have to kind of support them with other things. And I suppose, and then kind of on the back of that, I kind of set Camara up as it was a non-for-profit, and we set up at the end of 2005. And my view was always not so much to make it a kind of operate like a charity, but to kind of try and have it run a little bit like a business, if possible. Where the entrepreneurship came in and try and see if it could raise enough money through the work it was doing to support itself. So that was kind of an underlying kind of, I didn't want to be just giving things to people. I kind of felt they mightn't value it as much, but if we charged them a small price, they might value it more. And when I'm talking about a small price, it's talking about €5 a computer back then. That's what we were kind of selling them for. So we still had to raise money, but at least the people getting them felt like that they had a vested interest in using them, and that was kind of an important part of our culture from the early day. And actually, the other thing I noticed when I started collecting the computers was, they were just thrown out in Ireland. I mean, you'd see them in skips, you'd see them just thrown out. It just seems such a terrible thing to do, that we were throwing out these wonderful tools, and maybe they were still working, they were just a little bit out of date, but kind of said, well, if we can convince people rather than just throwing them out, that were properly refurbished and cleaned up and everything, they would have a second life, and that second life would be to do with education, and that would help some people who would never get the opportunity to get a computer. And here we are throwing them out. So that seemed to resonate with a lot of people. That rather than throwing this one out, I'd rather see it being used by a teacher or a kid in a school in Africa.
That's a very interesting situation you landed yourself in, because did you find that people became more aware of what was potentially sitting on their computers, as well as, deciding that, okay, the hardware is well out of date at this point, I'll just chuck it. Did you find that people, when it came to donating, actually started thinking, oh goodness, there's so much personal stuff on this computer still. Not only can I, give a second life to this thing, but, I can have it securely wiped, which was maybe not as big a concern back then.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point. Certainly some of the larger companies, when we started to get computers in some of the larger companies, they were concerned about their data. And so we had a full data wiping process and did it to a very high standard, the Department of Defense standard. But certainly a lot of the smaller companies and private individuals, there was no concept back then that the data sitting on the computer was valuable and could be used for malicious purposes. But basically any computer that came into our workshop got the full data wiping, because what we realized very early on that this, what we didn't want was any of this data to suddenly end up, being used by people who aren't meant to use it, or just ending up. So the data wiping was a really big part of what we had to convince people that we were doing, and I think even today that's probably still the biggest concern of organizations who are giving us their computers, that all that data is securely erased. I mean, there are some organizations who won't even give us the hard drives. They'll physically destroy the hard drives before they give us their computers, and that's fine as well. But I think that the software that's out there right now for completely cleaning all data is very, very powerful, and that's certainly a key part of the process in refurbishing a computer.
So in looking at kind of the other side of the equation, you mentioned your frustration when you went over to Ethiopia and found that some of your donations were, still boxed and unused. When did Camara's other element of teacher training come into effect? Because, as you said, you had this revelation that there was no point in just sending hardware if it's not being used properly. So how did that training element come together?
I think actually it was 2006, the summer of 2006. We went to UCD and their computer science department, and we looked to see if we could get some volunteers to go out to Ethiopia that year to do training, to start training the teachers on how to use the technology. So I think we got about 10 students, computer science students, went out that first year. Again, Camara volunteers, and we did some kind of pre-trip training with them. But they went out for a month and they visited the various schools. They trained the teachers. They showed the schools how to do kind of simple maintenance, and that was that made a big difference. That the teachers were, I mean, to be honest, a lot of the teachers in Ethiopia back then were not computer literate themselves, So the key was to give them the skills and the confidence that they could then use, feel comfortable with letting their students use them and using it in the classroom. So I think that worked, and we did that for about 5 or 6 years. Every summer we'd send out a team. I mean, eventually I think it grew to 40 or 50 volunteers who go out to different countries and start training the teachers in the schools. I suppose the thing we noticed was that they go out for a month or 6 weeks, but then when we went back next year, a lot of that training had kind of fallen away, or teachers had left the school, or so we decided that, great as the Irish volunteers were, that really what we need to do is to have our own operations on the ground. To have, so for instance, in Kenya, we needed to have Kenyans on the ground in Kenya teaching Kenyan teachers. So that was kind of, and again, that was another learning for us, that really it's very hard to do a lot of this support and training remotely. And it has to be done all year round. So that's when we started setting up what we call our education hubs in those countries, and staffing it with local people. And they would we would work with the hubs in Ireland, from Ireland to the hubs, but the hubs would do all the work directly with the schools. And that's been our model ever since.
I imagine that helped overcome an awful lot of boundaries, whether it be language issues or whether it be, the COVID pandemic when all travel pretty much shut down. Were you able to maintain your operations during that period?
Certainly, COVID was a big hit to us. Actually, to be honest, we had 2 big hits in our last 20 years. The first was the property crash, which was 2008, and kind of any kind of funding we had then kind of really dried up, and that was tough to kind of get through that. But then when COVID hit, because no one was working in offices anymore, so there was no computers becoming available for us to send out. That was the first thing. Second thing is a lot of the schools in Africa were just closed. So, we weren't able to get access to the schools anyway. And then obviously people really weren't allowed to travel. So that period of about a year and a half was very difficult. It did really help us that we had people out on the ground in those countries who were able to keep the operations going. And we had a certain stock of computers in these countries, which we were able to put into whatever schools were open. But the impact on the education system out in those, I know it was hard in Ireland, but I think in Ireland people were able to go online and at least get some of their lessons online. In Africa, that just wasn't possible. It was possible in a small number of instances where if someone had a computer at home in Africa, but that's very, very rare that someone will have a computer at home. So it was all tied into the schools. So, but that COVID period was very tough for us.
So let's have a look at where Camara is right now. I imagine you're still facing a couple of challenges. Assuming that, hardware is still coming in and that message of the value of the circular economy has gotten out. You're now dealing with a new generation of volunteers, Gen Z. How do you find their appetite is for voluntary work?
We have much fewer volunteers now. Again, what we decided, we would take the decision not to use Irish volunteers in Africa, so that need has been reduced. Certainly in Africa, we actually have volunteers in Africa. And very typically we would people who are doing, and typically it's a computer science type degree, they would go into our hubs in whether it's Kenya or Tanzania or Zambia, and they would volunteer for us. They would help do technical support for us. And to be honest, out there in Africa, the interest is still very, very high, because it's very hard for African students to get work experience in other companies. That's just not economy is not set up, but certainly when they come to Camara, they can get that experience. And, whether it's for 3 months or 6 months, it does mean that after having that experience and having some technical qualification, it makes it much easier for them to get a job. But in Ireland or the UK now, we really don't we don't rely on volunteers as much. In fact, we have a very small headcount outside Africa, and most of our staff are still in Africa.
That's fascinating. So your operation now is very much about getting sort of countries to be able to sustain themselves rather than relying on, for want of a better term, an outside influence.
Yeah, that's right, and that's in a way that was kind of always our model. And I'm thinking out loud now. I'm just wondering, did COVID really, push us to actually, do that much more strongly? Sorry, just. Sorry, now so we and I've lost my train of thought there. So we do rely very much on the teams out in Africa. I mean, going back to your earlier question about social entrepreneurship, our underlying goal when we set up these hubs was that they would become self-sustainable. That they would pay us a small amount of money to get them the computers. They would then sell those computers to the school. And when I say sell to the school, at this stage, let's say they'd sell a computer and monitor and everything for maybe €100, but the money that they would get from that would allow them to sustain themselves, and that certainly was our model. In certain countries, that has worked better than others, but in other countries, again, like the school system is so poor, the ministries of education are so poor that even $100 a computer they really can't afford. So we've had to, not that we've moved away from social entrepreneurship, we certainly do some of that, but more and more we've had to go to like project funding, where we get a large organizations. For instance, Dell would be one of our big supporters, and they would either provide us computers directly, or they would give us money to support our operations in different schools. So we've had to go to more project funding to kind of keep our operations going away from the social entrepreneur, where we were selling directly to individual schools.
So where do you see Camara going in future? Do you see Africa as remaining the target, or is there scope to apply something similar in Ireland? Well,
again, back in, I'm trying to think, it was 2011, 2012, we did set up a Camara Ireland, which was working very much with socially deprived schools in Ireland. I think they're called DESH schools. We set that up, and to be honest, I mean, that was hugely successful. It was a real shock to us as an organization to see that there was a real need in Ireland back then for technology and training and access to technology in schools. And so that was set up as Camara Ireland. And maybe about 5 years ago, that organization was fully self-sustainable. It didn't need any support from the main Camara organization. And they were doing wonderful. The work they were doing was a slightly bit more advanced form of technology. It wasn't like basic computer literacy, but it was things like programming, robotics, graphics design, on the computers. But again, with very socially deprived schools. And that was very, very successful. There's a big need for that. And about 5 years ago, that became a separate organization, and that merged with another organization called SUIS. And so today that organization is called Kenya, and it does exactly the same as we do in Africa, but it still does it with Irish schools.
And that was Cormac Lynch, founder of Camara, chatting with Niall Kitson. You can find out more about Camara on their website, which is camara.org. And that is in the show notes area of this podcast right now.
This is Tech Radio with Dusty Rhodes and Niall Kitson.
That's almost it for our show this week. Do check out some of the other stories we have online for you. We didn't manage to squeeze in, including
the Tech Excellence Awards 2025 has opened for entries. Bad news for Meta as it's laying off 3,000 employees. And a late-breaking story just as we're talking today. So you will also be able to read an account of how the Arts Council blew nearly €7 million on an IT system that never worked by Jason Walsh.
Oh, you'll find all of those and more online at techcentral.ie. We're back again next Friday with a brand new show online and on RT Radio 1 Extra. And do remember, please share our podcast with a friend. If they're into tech, tell them to look up Tech Radio Ireland on Apple, Spotify or YouTube. Until next week, from myself, Dusty Rhodes, and from Niall Kitson, as always, thanks for listening. Have a great weekend.
Remember, you can get the latest Irish tech news with hourly updates, daily newsletters, and more at our website, techcentral.ie. Share the knowledge and invite a friend to listen. Search Apple, Spotify, or YouTube for Tech Radio Ireland, or listen with RTE Radio 1 Extra. Tech Radio is produced by dustpod.io for techcentral.ie. From me, Artemis, live long and prosper.